It's not for being my well-being, but for any being on the planet to be in need just shouldn't be. The laws of equilibrium dictate that the political economy will not equilibrate till the wages in Africa are at par with the wages here. Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and today is Friday, October the 30th, 2020. There's like 2 or 3 days till voting day, and I apologize for having been off the air, but I had a minor accident a few weeks back, and I got hit by a young man on a motorized skateboard. Smacked into me. He was doing about 15-20 miles an hour on the sidewalk, hit me, threw me up into the air. Anyway, it caused me to be hospitalized, and it stopped me from doing these shows, that's for sure. So anyway, here I am. I'm tanned, rested, and back in the seat and ready to get going. And I was about to do a series of shows about this whole project I was involved in. I have a whole bunch of shows I want to do about the Organic Twinkie Project. And I spent all this time last night doing this. And I have it all done. I'm ready to post it. And then I'm watching Rachel Maddow. And I'm listening to the news coming out. And it's like, what am I doing talking about this ridiculous Twinkie project in the middle of this chaos that we're in? This is absolute mind-boggling what's going on. And the word that came to my mind was a coup. It seems like we're in the middle of a coup. And the familiar term is a coup d'etat, which is an overthrow of the state. And it's not exactly a coup, because a coup d'etat basically means that the opposing party comes in and either violently or through political means subverts the existing structure and takes it over. Well, in this case, they are the existing structure, and they are destroying the structure that they're in. They're eviscerating departments right and left. They're getting rid of the bureaucrats that have been there, the professionals that have been running these groups. They just passed he signed another executive order just about a week or so ago, which, if he gets elected, will allow him to get rid of this massive number of government workers and replace them with loyalists, which is what the whole plan is. You want to have loyalists in place. Now, we've talked about this in the past a couple of times, but hold on one second. Is that phone? Well, yeah, hello? Yeah, hi. Yeah, who's calling? This is, oh, son of a gun. You're the only, that's it, huh? Well, look at that picture I got of you. Do you see that picture? Yeah, that was you, yeah, you were getting your hands ready to plop them in some cement over there. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, right, Donald. All right, Donald. Listen, what I liked about the picture was the way you've got your hands up. You know this? So there's two moves you make, I've noticed all the time. There's two moves you make. You're telling people to stop talking, and then you do this number. Your dad taught you that, did he? So it had to shut people. I see. Yeah, definitely shut people down. Yeah, I was watching the 60-minute interview last week. What a disaster. Oh, you thought it was good? Okay, well, they showed it on Fox and everything, and you showed them, didn't you? You just got up and walked right out of the thing, right? Okay, well, listen, what I wanted to ask you, I was talking to somebody just the other day, and they said that Pelosi passed this House bill so that they could, if the president became incompetent, they could possibly replace him. And I thought it had to do with, they were talking about you. But so Biden wins, they're going to replace Biden, they're going to get him out, put Kamala in, and then Bernie and AOC are going to be the main people. They're going to kill capitalism and introduce socialism to America. Well, you think that's what's really going to happen? Well, how about socialism just for the middle class, and we take the socialism from the corporations away? No, you don't like the middle class. Okay, well, what about these other socialist cities you're talking about? I just ran into one of your supporters the other day, and he was raging on about New York, empty. It's a ghost town. They just opened art galleries in New York. I talked to my granddaughter there just the other day. And San Francisco is becoming a socialist. Are you kidding? You been here lately? you can't afford a one bed. It's more expensive in San Francisco now than it is in half of Manhattan. Well, it doesn't. Well, okay, I know it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter what they say. Yeah, you're right there. You have a point there. No, it doesn't matter. The other issue he brought up was about all these black families. The fathers are all missing, and it's because these guys are a bunch of drug addicts, and it's all their fault, right? Well, what happened back in the '60s? After you remember the '60s? You were in that little school there, the little military school. Yeah, they passed the Voting Rights Act. Remember? No, it was after your father was marching with the Ku Klux Klan. They passed the Voting Rights Act, and yeah, right. And this group of right wingers got together, and the plan was to flood the ghetto with drugs, so that they could arrest all these black males and break up the family. That was the plan. You didn't know that, huh? You know, a lot of people knew it. Angela Davis was talking about it in 1968. She was talking about it every day. There was the prison industrial complex. That's right. So anyway, just before I don't have too much time. We've already been on too long, but I just came from downstairs. Did you just say that the doctors and nurses were ripping off the COVID patient? They wanted them to die. They made more money. Are you trying to alienate the nurses too and the doctors? Well, they are professional, and well, they usually speak with some authority. And no, you don't have much authority. I know you don't. Well, oh, I see. That's why you're coming after them. It might not be the best group to go after. You know, nurses are they're pretty well revered through most communities. I mean, even in the middle of Iowa and Idaho and these places, because you don't think it matters. You know, you might be right. No matter what you do, it absolutely doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, all right. Listen, I'm going to get off because it's just been too long, and there's enough talking with you. But the picture, I really like the picture. I think it portrays you, really well, and it just shows really who you are. Okie doke. Okay, so we'll talk at another time. Maybe maybe we won't. We'll see. Okay. Bye now. Well, you never know who's going to call, and there he was again, the son of a guy. He can't stop. It used to be we'd get some calls from a lot of different interesting people, but he just pushes them all out of the way and barges his way in the room. What I said earlier when I was talking about the little poem I wrote, which I lead the show off with all the time, and it's not for being my well-being, but for any being on the planet to be in need just shouldn't be. It seems to me that if we consider all of us in this together, that we don't really want any of us suffering. If one of us suffers, then we all suffer. And if we start to develop a consciousness that incorporates the whole, then we start to realize that what's bad for anybody is bad for all of us. So the poem ends with the fact that, with the statement that the wages in Africa, it's not for being my well-being, but for any being on the planet to be in need just shouldn't be. The laws of equilibrium dictate that the political economy will not equilibrate till the wages in Africa are at par with the wages here. So as long as we're into this locked-in capitalist kind of a system, the system supposedly purports to have three legs to it. They're supposed to be land, labor, and capital are the three legs of capitalism. Well, the labor leg is a little bit short. Let's be realistic. The labor leg is very short. In fact, it might even be a two-legged stool, which is sort of why it's always falling over, because it's not equal. So it's a two-legged stool with capitalism being the dominant, labor and land. And let's get real about land. Land is really money. That's what we're talking about here. So we got money here, money there, and then we got labor here. And this three-legged stool of capitalism is very, very off-sided, which is why it's always going into some type of a crisis. We're having a crisis right now. We had a crisis a few years back. We had a crisis every so many years, every 7 years or so, or every 8 or 9 or 10 years, you wind up getting these big dips and everything. The system is designed to have periodic failures. The system is also designed to create an inequality, which was well documented with Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century. The rate of return on labor is always less than the rate of return on capital. So the point of this poem was that as long as we're in this sort of capitalist political economy that we live in, there's always going to be a search for a lower paying job somewhere on the planet. So the American here in America and in Europe, generally considered the West, the wages got improved on the backs of the third world countries. We were ripping off their raw materials, largely ripping off their raw materials, and ripping off a lot of stuff politically. In the process, we were able to enrich ourselves, and we built up a strong middle class, which was really quite successful all through the 50s and the 60s. Well, the 60s came along, and we realized what we were doing to a lot of other people on the planet, and we started to act in a different direction. And that's when the forces that be kicked in, and that's when the 60s ended, the 70s started, and by the time we get to 75, we have the Powell memo starting to come into full force. I'm going to move over to this one board for 1 minute here. Let me this is a little timetable I put up a while ago, and I'm going to fill this in as we go along. I guess maybe my head should be in there too, huh? Okay. Because around here, when the Powell memo got written by this Chief Justice, and what he's doing is he's basically responding to the student and labor unrest that took place all during the 60s. And they're creating, they're proposing, it's a Chamber of Commerce thing, and they're creating, they're causing to create these think tanks all through the 80s and 90s. And within the Powell memo, which I will talk about more on another occasion, fair and balanced is actually punched up on, I think, page 3 or 4 of the Powell memo. The blueprint for Fox News is laid out early on here around 1950s. So let me go back to the main screen here. We'll get off the board there. And what I wanted to talk about was how this concept I had, this goes back like 20 years. I wrote this poem 20 years ago. You could see this happening. The global international trade, once you start to open up the whole world and you start to trade with the whole world, well, where's labor going to find its soft point? Wherever the cheapest labor is. So for years, way back when this whole multinational movement started, it was Japan. And if you recall, before they started to create these marvelous cars in the early 80s, but still during the 70s and late 60s, when the multinationals just started to grow, made in Japan was a symbol for made in junk. Everything made in Japan was junk. It was stuff you'd find in little trinket stores, and there was all sorts of little plastic and crap. So made in Japan was made in cheap land. Well, the Japanese got very good at what they were doing, obviously. And by the 80s and by the late 70s, they started to introduce cars, which were suddenly way better than anything that was coming out of Detroit or American car makers. And suddenly you were buying cars that lasted not just 3 years and 4 years, but lasted 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 10 years even. So the Japanese really got on it. Well, suddenly made in Japan didn't mean made cheap anymore. And that's when things, as the multinationals grew, things switched over and made in China. So the Chinese had this huge, billions of people that during the 50s were still in a period of mass starvations here and there, and they're just sort of coming out of that. And as they did, they were the cheap labor market on the planet. So made in China, everything's made in China now. So as they transitioned from what had been a more communist, socialist, into introducing more capitalist kind of concepts and principles into there, you wind up with them creating as much lying, cheating, and stealing in business as we've got over here. Only they did it on a larger scale, creating companies like Alibaba. Don't even get me going about these guys. So anyway, the Chinese have been at the forefront of the cheap labor market for a long, long time now. Well, who stops it? As they've created a bigger market, they were forced to pay people more money. So the middle classes started to grow in China over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And as it did, a lot of the labor moved out of there over to Vietnam, over to Bangladesh, over to Africa. And Africa is without a doubt the last place on the planet. It's the last stop. It's the last stop where the labor market is going to be well, right now it's the cheapest labor market on the planet. And as we develop more and more products coming from Africa, we'll lift them up too. So what will happen is the whole world will lift itself up till eventually there's an equilibrium. There'll be an equilibrium. And that's what happens with political economy. You're looking to create an equilibrium. The market will always tend to do that. And the labor market can do that. The capital markets are already doing it. That's the big little rap I wanted to give about that. I opened up by reading a poem I wrote a long time ago, and I was actually going to read a poem from, well, I'll just throw the poem up there. I was going to read a poem from Dianne dePrima, who just died. She's in the paper. She died the other day, 80-something years old. And there's the poem, and I'll just read it while well, here it is. My vow is to remind us all to celebrate. There is no time too desperate, no season that is not a season for song. Well, that was a nice positive line from Dianne dePrima. Dianne dePrima was a noted Reflections on My Life as a Woman. This was a major book that is an autobiography put on a while ago. I took some classes with her back in San Francisco. I think she was the poet laureate here for a while. And she has a really interesting statement in the book. And this is on page 26, Recollections of My Life as a Woman. That women had to learn to bear more pain than men. That was just how they were made. Women, Mom went on to tell me, had periods, had babies. Even in cooking and cleaning, they got hurt more. I would, she assured me, get used to it. My fingers would get calloused, and pots and fires wouldn't hurt as they did now. I looked forward to this armor as a good thing. She described it as a blessing. So that's in her autobiography, and there she is at a poetry reading, and the picture's really cool. It's at the Gaslight Cafe. If you look really closely, you can see the little sign there. She's sitting on a piano at the Gaslight Cafe. I believe that's in Greenwich Village. She's born in Brooklyn. She's an Italian from Brooklyn, and being an Italian from Brooklyn, a lot of the Italians that came over from Italy in the 30s and 40s were very communist oriented. And one of the poems that's in Dianne's book, Piece of a Story, it's the title of the poem is got to do with revolutionaries, and it's Revolutionary Letters, which he dedicated to Bob Dylan. I'm not going to read the whole poem. I'm just going to read a couple of lines here and there. I have just realized that the stakes are myself. I have nothing else to barter with but my life. Stanza 12. For every revolutionary must at least will his own destruction, rooted as he is in the past, which he sets out to destroy. There's an interesting concept. Every revolutionary must at least will his own destruction, rooted as he is in the past, which he sets out to destroy. So revolutionaries are trying to change the system over, and what they're trying to come from is what they're trying to destroy. And the last stanza is, we are not alone. We have brothers in the hills. We have sisters in the jungles. We even have brothers on the frozen tundra. They sit by their fires. They sing. They gather arms. They multiply. They will reclaim the earth. They will reclaim the earth. I felt that was a little bit positive statement about reclaiming the earth, and the reason it was really punched home for me was last night on PBS there's a show called The Age of Nature, and it was a really interesting show about the condition of the world today, and they started off in Bhutan, which is carbon neutral, the only carbon neutral country on the planet. I think 80% of their land is still covered with forest, and 20% is pavement. It's mostly mountains. It's in the Himalayas. Mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys. It's a rugged place. But the point is they're actually carbon neutral. And they have worked on this over the years to to maintain the forest they have. It's not easy, but in spite of that, in spite of all that, they're still severely getting encroached upon by the climate change that's happening, and therefore they're very, very aware of it. And the show opens with the notation that we're at a turning point in history. This is a global problem that needs a global solution. We're moving in a new direction. How we live with nature, this will determine our future. How we live with nature, this will determine our future. So we're at a point right now where a couple of days away from this election, which Donald Trump is trying to call into question before it even really gets going. He's just, day after day, it's either the Russians are hacking in, or the Republican Party is trying to stop votes in Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin. There's battles going on all over the country about counting votes. These guys don't want anything to do with democracy. This is an autocracy, and he's an autocratic ruler who's trying to put himself in there for this next term. He's trying to basically disallow this whole election, is what he'd like to do. Now, people are turning out in massive numbers all over the country, which is really good. There's going to be a lot of people. There's more people voted in Texas already than had voted at the election last time, and this kind of thing is going on all around the country. So there's a huge rising of people. Hopefully, it's a huge rising of people that are opposed to Donald Trump and in favor of Joe Biden. And I know Biden and the Democratic Party, representative of the establishment, and I got a lot of people listening, some people listening to me, because there aren't that many people listening, some people listening to me who are really upset with the Democratic Party. And I could sit here and I could go back to my little board over here, and I could talk about the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and how terrible the Democratic Party has been, and let's get rid of the poem, and how the Democratic Party under Obama was more Republican than the Republicans were. Obama was, Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman. I mean, this guy wasn't exactly a flaming socialist on any level. And the reason the Republicans were opposed to this guy he was black. It was pretty obvious. They got together, the week that he was inaugurated, and they sat down and they put together a plan to stop everything he tried to put through. Now we got this bozo in the White House, the orange-headed monster, and all he talks about is he's obsessed with Obama. Anything he's got his name on, he's got to get rid of. So these people are sort of going, maybe it's too far, I don't know. But I talk to people a lot, and I don't understand any more than Krugman understands or David Brooks understands. I don't understand what the attraction is to him. Now, the only thing that makes any sense is that they are in a bubble that's so tight. They're watching Fox News. They're watching Brett Bark. They're watching OAN, this new One American network that's on. Rush Limbaugh and the rest of these crazies that are on. This whole crowd, I don't understand it. Honest to God, I don't understand it. Other than the fact that they lie all the time. They put these lies out. And they put them out with such a straight face that all these people sitting there listening to this believe this. And I talk to Trump heads all the time. And what they spout out, as soon as you read an article, say, in the New York Times, the New York Times is this liberal rag. You gotta be kidding me. The liberal Times is so middle of the road, you're gonna run over an armadillo if you miss the yellow line in the middle of the road, because they're so middle of the road. They're anything but some raving left-wing socialist paper. And if you just even look at the headlines over a period of time, they are so sympathetic to Trump, it gets me upset. Now, I read the Times every day, and the reason you read it is because it's the news that's going out to everybody. The Washington Post, the New York Times, these are things that are going out to the entire population. So everybody gets this information and massages it. Now, by the time you watch the late night talk shows in the evening, you're getting a reaction to the news that was posted in the paper in many cases. So it's not that it's this liberal bias or anything. The news is put out there, and then it's commented upon all during the day and night. And if you pay attention to what's in the actual news section and you look at those headlines, I wouldn't be making Trump out like he was a normal person on any level ever. He's a gangster. The guy's a gangster. He did business with the Russian mob from 80 to 88, and introduced to the Russian mob by Roy Cohn, who was in bed with the Russian mob, in bed with Donald Trump too. Roy Cohn's the one who died of AIDS, so he was definitely in bed with Donald Trump. And then when Cohen died of AIDS in 88, he's the one who's memorialized in Angels in America, lying in the bed with his arms out dying. What does Trump do then? He meets Felix Slater, who introduces him to the Russian mob. So he goes from the Italian mob to the Russian mob overnight. And that's who started to lend him money in the 90s. To this day, they're still tracing money that's either going through Cyprus or directly into Deutsche Bank that's connected with Trump and his family. For him to be standing up there making these ridiculous statements that he has nothing to do with these Ruskies and that he doesn't know what's going on. Before he was even sworn in, Flynn is making deals with the Ruskies. After he gets sworn in, he's got two of them in the office. He's giving them state secrets. It is so blatant what is going on with this guy. And then we get Barr in the middle of this whole thing 2 years later, and he's just eviscerating the rule of law. This is a coup. We have been watching a slow-moving coup. And from November 3rd on, it's going to get really interesting. So it's not going to be a slam dunk. Oh, Biden won by, a couple of 100 million votes or 1 million votes or something. No matter what happens, he is going to be out there in the courts doing things to throw roadblocks into anybody else taking office over him. No doubt about it. This is his tactic continuously. He spends more time in court suing people than anybody I've ever known on the planet. And I'll make a quick aside about myself with people getting sued. One of my top 10 reasons for leaving New York when I did back in the around 1975, the kids were in the playground playing. I lived in Forest Hills, and it was a very lawyered up neighborhood. And the kids were playing in the park down below the house and the apartment building we were in. And I heard this kid yell out, "My father's going to sue your father." Well, I grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. It was, "My father's going to beat up your father. My father's going to do this to your father." I had never heard, "My father's going to sue your father." Well, this is Donald Trump's motto through life. "My father's going to sue your father." I have been extremely frustrated in not knowing really what to do. I don't even want to call relatives of mine because most of them, who I know I'm going to call, I was going to ask them if they voted, they're racist Trump supporters. And I don't want to get into a fight with people like this. I just did the other day for about an hour, and it wasn't a relative, it was somebody else I know. And it just turns into a screaming match for me. I'm really not that good at controlling myself with this basket of deplorables. She hit the nail on the head with that one. So anyway, Age of Nature on PBS, a great show, pointing out what the problems are and what the solutions are. They had a whole bunch of solutions in there about how to restore the carbon balance on the planet. So I advise people, you want a little bit of positivity for the week. Before you go out to vote, go watch Age of Nature. It's on PBS, and you could probably search for it and find it. They're going to repeat it again. And other than that, make sure you vote. You can only vote once, and you can't change your vote once you've made your vote in, which he said again today. I think he said that this morning. He said if you voted for somebody else, you can change your vote now. I mean, the guy just, out of his mouth, anything comes out. Anything comes out. And I was going to do a piece about totalitarianism and Hannah Arendt, but we're not going to do it. It's already almost a half hour. It is a half hour. So I did a regular old half-hour show today. Forget the day 7 thing. Peace, patience, persistence, and we'll try to get another show up as soon as possible.